Have you ever left a conversation replaying the moment and thinking, why didn't I say what I truly meant? Have you watched someone else speak with sharpness and clarity and wondered why your thoughts seem to get tangled when you try to express them? Why do certain people command attention the instant they begin to speak while you can feel invisible, as if your words evaporate the moment they leave your mouth? Here's a straightforward truth: effective communication is not a talent granted to only a lucky few. It is a skill you can cultivate. It is not about stuffing sentences with fancy vocabulary or trying to sound intellectual. It is about learning to speak in ways that make your voice noticed, your ideas understood, and your presence felt, without raising your volume or pretending to be someone else. This recording is not a surface-level speaking course, it is an invitation to awaken the speaker inside you, one who is calm, authentic, and impossible to ignore. Over the course of this journey you will learn how to speak with quiet confidence, how to influence others without manipulation, and how to build trust, respect, and presence one thoughtful phrase at a time. If you're ready to stop shrinking into silence and to start bringing your voice into the world with clarity, in meetings, interviews, relationships, and everyday life, what you are about to hear could be transformative. When you learn to communicate effectively, you do more than change how people hear you. You change how they respond to you. Picture walking into a room of professionals, potential partners, or strangers. You haven't shown your credentials, you haven't demonstrated your skills, and you haven't even sat down. Yet within the first 30 seconds of speaking, listeners have already formed impressions about your intelligence, confidence, and credibility. That is the quiet reality of human interaction: how you speak shapes your perceived identity long before your actions do. This is not just a hunch. Research has found that people form judgments about others almost instantly based on voice tone, clarity, and word choice. In an era of fast communication and truncated attention spans, your voice becomes a signature. How intelligent you sound often determines whether doors open or remain closed. That is why learning to speak clearly and intentionally matters more now than ever. But what does speaking well actually mean? It's not about sounding robotic or showing off an advanced vocabulary. Speaking well is about delivering clarity, structure, and confidence in ways that invite trust and attention. Every time you speak, you are either building credibility or chipping away at it. Think of the leaders whose words changed history. They were not merely informed, they were purposeful with their speech. They understood when to pause, what stories to tell, and how to command attention without raising their voices. Their influence came from intention, not volume. We live in a noisy world. Social media, video calls, short-form clips, and constant notifications compress our attention into tiny windows. People scroll, swipe, and judge quickly. In that environment, the person who can speak with composure and clarity stands out like a lighthouse. Whether you're in a job interview, on a date, delivering a presentation, recording a video, or simply having a conversation, how you communicate creates impact. Speak clearly and you become trusted, speak vaguely and you risk being tuned out. Consider a simple, real-life example. Two candidates sit down for the same interview. Their resumes look similar. One answers questions in a scattered way, filling gaps with filler words, jumping between ideas. The other answers with structure, frames responses thoughtfully, and offers specific examples. Which candidate will be remembered? Which feels more capable? The answer is obvious: the person who speaks smart. Clarity builds trust, trust leads to decisions. Here's the encouraging part: this ability is learnable. You do not need to be born a magnetic speaker. You do not need a perfect accent or a superior IQ. You need a growth mindset, a handful of practical techniques, and the courage to show up and practice. Speaking well is a superpower that serves you in public and private moments alike. It helps you resolve conflicts without escalation, pitch ideas persuasively, and connect more deeply with the people around you. Most importantly, it helps you live inside your voice with confidence. As we move forward, you will discover ways to shape your voice so it reflects intelligence and authenticity. You'll learn how to expand your vocabulary in a way that sounds natural rather than performative. You'll practice thinking before you speak, listening before you answer, and balancing heart with reason. You'll unpack the patterns great communicators use and learn how to adapt them to your own temperament and life. Ask yourself this now: what if the way you speak could change the course of your life? What if speaking intelligently is not about pleasing others but about expressing the best version of yourself? Your voice already carries power, it merely needs direction. When you invest in how you communicate, you alter how the world receives you. You create opportunities, strengthen relationships, and shape your reputation. This work starts with small shifts. It begins with the simple discipline of noticing how you present your ideas. It begins with choosing clarity over cleverness and connection over performance. It moves forward when you accept that being understood is a form of generosity, when you choose to deliver meaning in a way others can actually receive. That is what the smartest speakers do. They seek not to impress, but to be understood. Over the next sessions we will explore the science that explains why certain speech patterns feel compelling. We will learn how rhythm, tone, and pause shape perception. We will refine how you select vocabulary so your words land with force rather than float away. We will organize your thinking into structures that are easy to follow. We will build the confidence that allows you to speak under pressure without collapsing into anxiety. We will show you how listening is not passive but the most strategic speaking skill of all. We will replace filler and hedging language with clean, purposeful phrasing, and we will help you cultivate authenticity so your message feels real and memorable. Imagine, in practical terms, speaking in a way that reflects the intelligence you already possess. Imagine speaking so that people lean in, not because you are loud, but because you are clear. Imagine using your voice to create the kind of influence that brings others along rather than pushes them away. That's the promise of speaking thoughtfully and intentionally. So let's begin here, with the decision to treat your voice like the instrument it is. Let's commit to learning techniques that are simple but potent, habits you can practice daily until they become second nature. Begin by noticing one thing about how you speak today: your pace, your use of fillers, your tendency to over-explain, or your nervous habits. Pick one and practice changing it in conversations this week. Small, steady actions compound into real progress. You don't have to wait for a perfect moment to start. The opportunities to practice are everywhere: in short interactions, in meetings, in phone calls, in the way you introduce yourself. Each time you choose clarity over clutter you grow your presence. Each time you listen before you answer you build credibility. Each time you pause instead of filling the silence you signal control. That is how influence is built, one clear sentence at a time. What actually makes someone sound intelligent? Is it a wide vocabulary, perfect grammar, or an accent that doesn't distract? The answer might surprise you: none of those elements alone create the impression of intelligence. What persuades the listener is how the brain responds to the way words are arranged, how ideas are delivered, and the emotional signals wrapped around those words. Neuroscience tells us that people are drawn to speech patterns that are clear, rhythmic, and emotionally grounded. When someone speaks with intelligence, the listener's brain lights up because meaning is made easy to absorb. Research has found that organized language, delivered in a steady rhythm with natural pauses, calms the listener's processing system. Think back to a TED Talk or a favorite interview. The speaker did not rush. They were deliberate, they emphasized key phrases, and they timed their pauses. That control is not performance, it is structure meeting delivery. Rhythm, pause, and emphasis form a kind of audio architecture that lets each idea settle before the next one arrives. When your words arrive in a pleasing cadence, people are more likely to stay engaged. Pace matters. Studies show that a slightly slower, deliberate pace is perceived as more thoughtful and trustworthy than hurried speech. This is not about dragging sentences or sounding bored. It is about allowing your words space to breathe so the listener's brain can register and value each point. A well-placed pause after a strong claim gives the brain time to catch up and register the statement as important. Learn to respect silence. A pause is not a failure of speech, it is a tool for emphasis. Tone is another powerful lever. Tone signals how the listener should feel about the content. The same sentence can land as indifferent or caring depending on tone. If words are the content, tone is the emotional context that carries them. When you highlight a word with intentional stress, you guide attention toward what matters. Slightly raising volume on a keyword, or slowing before a crucial phrase, tells the brain to prioritize that part of the message. Skilled speakers use tone like a sculptor uses light, to reveal shape and depth. Nonverbal sounds and breathing patterns also alter perception. If your speech is breathless, listeners feel tension. If your breathing is steady, your message lands as calm and controlled. Small exhalations before important phrases and relaxed inhalations between sentences produce a rhythm that feels natural. That rhythm, combined with measured pace and intentional emphasis, creates an auditory signature that listeners find trustworthy and compelling. There are examples throughout history that illustrate this. Consider iconic speeches that changed minds and moved millions. These speeches were not powerful merely because of the words written on the page. They were powerful because of cadence, repetition, and tonal shifts that created a feeling and a rhythm the audience could follow. The craft of those speakers was in designing the experience of listening, not only the content of the speech. The brain rewards clarity with dopamine. When a speaker makes complex ideas easy to understand, the listener experiences a small, pleasant reward. That physiological response is part of why some speakers become instant favorites. They consistently produce clarity that feels good to receive. If you want to sound intelligent, practice producing speech that the listener's brain can process effortlessly. Start cultivating 3 simple habits that shape how your words are perceived. Slow your pace just enough to allow meaning to land without losing energy. Let your sentences breathe and avoid the rush to fill silence. Use emphasis strategically to signal what the listener should hold on to. The contrast between emphasized words and the rest of the sentence is what creates mental landmarks. Train your voice to use tone deliberately so that emotional content matches the logical content of your words. Respect the pause. When you hold silence after an important sentence, you create an invisible stage for the listener's thoughts. That empty space is where understanding deepens and connection forms. Use that pause to let your message digest. Use it to invite reflection, tension, or agreement. A pause makes a statement memorable. Remember that sounding intelligent is not the same as sounding like a scholar. It is about crafting speech that triggers trust and mental ease. When a listener's brain finds your pattern rewarding, they attribute intelligence, credibility, and charisma to you. The elements are already within reach. Awareness and practice are the keys. As you refine your delivery, you will also refine your word choices. The next step is to build a vocabulary that serves clarity rather than ornamentation. Simple, precise words land better than complex phrases that obfuscate. A smart speaker chooses vivid verbs rather than weak phrases and replaces fillers with silence. That precision in language pairs with refined delivery to create a persuasive presence. Over time, integrate listening into this practice. Pay attention to how people respond to different tempos and tones. Notice which words spark nods and which ones cause people to drift. Communication is a feedback loop. Your voice adapts to the responses you observe. The smarter your delivery becomes, the more predictable the reaction. You can then tailor your speech to the moment with greater confidence. Most people assume that sounding intelligent requires a large vocabulary, perfect grammar, or an accent that signals education. The surprising reality is that none of those alone make you sound sharp. What truly matters is whether your words make meaning easy to receive. The clearest speakers do not try to decorate their sentences with complexity, they aim to be understood. Clarity is the highest form of intelligence in communication. If your language confuses listeners, who cares how many $5 words you use? The point is lost. There's a famous test: if you can't explain an idea simply, you probably don't understand it well enough. The smartest communicators use plain, specific words to move ideas across. They prefer precise verbs over padded phrases. Instead of saying, "He made the decision," they say, he decided. Instead of, she gave help, they say, she helped. Those small shifts trim the fat. They make sentences lighter and easier to carry. When you speak with precise language, every word pulls its weight. Simplicity does not mean poverty of thought. It means generosity to the listener. Choose words that create images, feelings, or simple comprehension instead of distance. Replace abstract jargon with concrete examples. If a phrase feels like a mask you're wearing to impress, remove it. Ask yourself, does this word help my message land, or does it hide it behind gloss? If it hides, cut it. If it helps, keep it. One practical habit that transforms vocabulary is to build a small, practical word bank. Each week learn 4 or 5 words that are useful, not showy. Words like insight, clarity, strategy, impact, authentic are far more valuable than obscure synonyms you'll never use naturally. Practice slotting those words into sentences where they genuinely fit. Habits are formed when you speak them aloud until they feel like your own. Another powerful habit is removing filler and hedging language. Phrases like, I think, I feel, maybe, just, sort of, are softeners. They weaken clear statements and give your audience permission to doubt. Replace fillers by pausing. The silence is stronger than a meaningless filler. Your brain will recalibrate, a calm pause signals thoughtfulness, not confusion. There's also a rhythm to clean speech. Short sentences interspersed with slightly longer ones create musical contrast. Use short lines when you need impact, expand when you need context. Imagine your message like a song that needs chorus and verse. Repetition of key phrases acts like a chorus, repeating the central idea makes it stick. But repetition must be purposeful, not mechanical. Use the technique sparingly to emphasize what truly matters. Now let's shift from words to structure. Words without order fall flat. The clearest speakers arrange thoughts so listeners can follow a simple path. A reliable structure is your safety net: setup, core idea, close. First set the scene. Then deliver the central point. Finally, end with an actionable closing or a clear takeaway. That 3-step arc feels natural to the mind and gives your message momentum. The rule of 3 matters because our brains love patterns of 3, they feel complete and satisfying. When making a case, offer 3 reasons, 3 benefits, or 3 outcomes. It's not arbitrary, the brain likes compact groupings and remembers them better. If you're answering a question in a meeting, consider a 3-point response: the situation, the solution, the result. That format sounds intentional and thoughtful. Signposting is another underrated tool. Tiny phrases that tell listeners where you're going, like, first, here's why it matters, there are 2 things to consider, act as mental road signs. They reduce cognitive load and increase persuasion because the listener can follow your map. Signposts don't make a message simple-minded, they make it accessible. Story structure is the most magnetic structure of all. Humans remember narrative. Even in business contexts, a brief story with a clear arc, setup, conflict, resolution, lesson, anchors abstract claims in concrete experience. A short personal anecdote that illustrates a point makes it memorable because it gives people an image and an emotional cue to hold on to. Good stories don't have to be epic, the most effective ones are short slices of truth that reveal a lesson. As you organize your speech, practice reducing complexity into digestible chunks. If you must cover 3 complex points, break them into sub-ideas and use examples. Replace long, meandering explanations with crisp summaries that include one example. Practice structure frees you from memorizing lines, you only need to remember the arc. Structure gives shape, but it's confidence that gives your words force. Confidence is not the absence of fear, it's the presence of purpose. People listen to confidence even before they fully understand the content because confidence signals authority. But this authority is not blunt arrogance. The kind of confidence that earns respect is quiet, grounded, and rooted in preparation. Start building confidence by practicing aloud. Speaking is a motor skill. Record yourself and listen back. The gap between how you think you sound and how you actually sound is often wide. Use recordings to notice patterns. Do you rush? Do you trail off at the end of sentences? Do you pepper your speech with fillers? Awareness is the first step toward change. Breath control is an underrated ally. When nerves spike, breathe slowly and deliberately before you speak. A single deep breath calms your nervous system and gives your next sentence a grounded start. Practice starting sentences after a breath instead of mid-exhale. This technique reduces haste and increases vocal steadiness. Also attend to posture. Body language feeds voice. If you slouch or shrink, your voice follows. Stand or sit tall enough to allow your breath to expand. Keep your shoulders relaxed and your chin level. A composed body sets up a composed voice. In video or phone calls, small adjustments, leaning in slightly, keeping eyes engaged, translate into a stronger perceived presence. Use tone as an instrument. Confident speakers anchor their sentences rather than let them trail upward like questions. A deliberate downward inflection can communicate certainty without aggression. Vary your pitch to avoid monotone, lift slightly for curiosity, lower slightly for conviction. Emphasis is not yelling, it's choosing where the listener's attention should land. Finally, build confidence through repetition of small wins. Don't wait for a major presentation to prove you can speak well. Begin with micro-challenges, ask a question in a meeting, introduce yourself with a clear two-sentence statement, share one idea on a team call. Each small success reshapes your internal story about what's possible. Over time, these moments compound into an authentic, resilient confidence. Remember this: structure makes your ideas coherent, words make them precise, delivery makes them persuasive. None of these elements alone creates effective communication. They combine. When your vocabulary is clear, your structure intentional, and your delivery calm and confident, you become a speaker who is heard and trusted. Listening is often the overlooked superpower of great communicators. The people who command respect are rarely those who dominate the air, they are those who pay attention in a way that signals understanding. Listening well is not passive. It is an active stance that lets you gather context, notice emotion, and tailor your response to the real need of the other person. When you listen to understand instead of listening to reply, your words gain weight because they arrive as responses shaped by what was actually said, not as rehearsed remarks shoehorned into the moment. When someone feels heard, they relax and open up. That openness gives you information you could not have guessed. The best negotiators, leaders, and interviewees use listening as a strategic tool. They let others reveal their priorities and then address those priorities directly. In practice, this looks like eye contact, small acknowledgments, and short reflective phrases that confirm comprehension. It looks like asking clarifying questions that invite the speaker to expand on what matters most. Small verbal cues such as, "Tell me more about that," or, "What happened next?" convert conversation into discovery and create a space where your eventual reply lands with precision. Listening also gives you time. The pause you gain by genuinely attending to someone is a space to craft a considered reply rather than a reflexive comeback. That space is where authority is built. People respect responses that are rooted in what they said rather than in what the responder wants to say. In tense moments, listening changes the dynamic. Instead of escalating a dispute by firing back, a focused question that surfaces the real concern can disarm emotion and reposition the exchange from confrontation to collaboration. That is how the smartest communicators convert conflict into progress. Part of listening is also reading nonverbal signals. Tone, pace, posture, and facial expression reveal layers of meaning underneath words. If someone's voice tightens, that may be anxiety. If they camouflage anger with humor, that is a different cue. Noticing these signals allows you to respond with empathy, matching the emotional register while steering conversation toward productive outcomes. Empathy in speech is not softness, it is a strategic alignment that fosters trust and primes people to hear the ideas you bring next. Cleaning up your speech starts with eliminating filler words and weakening phrases. Fillers like like, you know, and filler clauses such as, I guess, or, sort of, act as verbal padding that distracts from your point. They are auditory clutter. Replace them with silence. Pausing for a beat before you answer or between sentences gives your listener time to process and signals that you value precision over volume. Shrinking language that apologizes for your presence or hedges your ideas, phrases like, this might be silly, or, I'm no expert but, undermine your credibility before you've had a chance to make your point. Remove those preemptive apologies and speak directly. Framing small statements with phrases such as, one idea I'd add is, or, here's my perspective, preserves politeness while maintaining authority. There is a practical exercise that helps break filler habits. Record yourself speaking on a simple topic for 1 minute and count the filler words. Awareness is the only way out of habitual speech patterns. Next, practice replacing fillers with deliberate pauses and rehearsing a set of strong openers that you can rely on when nervous. Over time, the pauses will feel normal and your language will sharpen. Your listener will notice the difference even if they can't name it, your words will feel intentional and your presence will feel steadier. Authenticity is the heart of persuasive, memorable speech. Technique without truth reads as performance. The most compelling communicators are those who speak from their lived experience, who don't pretend to have all the answers, and who reveal something of themselves in the telling. Authenticity is not about oversharing or abandoning professionalism, it is about choosing language that aligns with your values and your real perspective. When you speak from a place that feels honest, your audience senses it and the connection deepens. Vulnerability can be an amplifier, not a liability, when used with discretion. A brief admission of uncertainty paired with a clear next step often increases trust because it signals humility and competence at once. Cultivating authenticity begins with self-awareness. Know the stories you can tell that genuinely illustrate your points. Own your mistakes as learning moments. Use personal examples to translate abstract ideas into lived meaning. When you combine this authenticity with structure and clarity, your message becomes both credible and compelling. People don't remember polished statements as much as they remember a human who stood in front of them and said something that rang true. High-stakes moments reveal whether your preparation and habits hold up under pressure. The common pattern is simple: under stress, people default to their practiced behavior. If your practice has been chaotic thinking and panicked speech, pressure will reveal those habits. If your practice has been deliberate, structured, and calm, pressure will reveal confidence. Preparation for high-stakes speaking means clarifying your core outcome, selecting 2 or 3 supporting stories or data points, and rehearsing the structure you will use if you are interrupted or challenged. Visualize the sequence you want the conversation to follow and rehearse your breathing. A steady breath reorganizes your nervous system and gives you access to controlled tone and pace. When conflict rises, use structure as a refuge. Start with a short acknowledgement of the other person's view, then state your central point in a concise way, and finally offer a next step or a question that invites collaboration. That simple format allows you to remain firm without escalating and to be heard without being defensive. Remember that you rarely need to win the moment, you need to move the situation forward toward a better outcome. Small strategic language like, I hear you, followed by, here is what I see, signals both respect and clarity, and it persuades more effectively than volume or aggression. Persuasion itself is a craft that blends logic, emotion, and credibility. You want people to arrive at decisions willingly, not because they feel coerced. Appeal to reason by being specific, use clear evidence, quantified results, and direct examples. Appeal to emotion by telling stories that anchor the facts in human terms. Anchor your argument in credibility by being candid about limitations and by citing relevant experience or data. When logic, feeling, and trust are woven together, influence happens naturally. Timing matters too. Present your strongest points when the listener is most receptive, and use questions that lead people to discover the conclusion themselves. People persuade themselves more deeply than they accept persuasion imposed upon them. Storytelling is the most potent tool in this persuasive toolbox. A short, well-structured story activates the listener's imagination and connects abstract data to real consequences. The basic story blueprint remains the most reliable: introduce the situation, reveal the obstacle, show the turning point, and end with a clear lesson or outcome. Even in technical contexts, a brief narrative that illustrates the human impact of a change will stick far longer than a list of benefits. Stories are memory anchors. They give listeners an emotional map they can return to later. Use stories sparingly, pick them with intention, and tie them explicitly to the point you want the audience to take away. Charisma is not a mystical trait reserved for a celebrity few. It is the intersection of presence, warmth, and clarity. Presence is the ability to be fully in the room, listening without distraction. Warmth is the signal that you care about the people you are addressing. Clarity is the discipline of delivering a message that is easy to follow. When these three combine, people feel both seen and led. Charismatic speakers do not perform, they connect. Simple gestures, using someone's name, pausing before an important sentence, smiling where appropriate, create a sense of familiarity and trust that amplifies the content of your words. Influence in everyday conversation operates on similar principles. Reciprocity, consistency, social proof, liking, and scarcity are psychological levers that, when used ethically, nudge decisions toward mutually beneficial outcomes. Offer genuine help before asking for favors. Ask questions that align people with their own values. Cite the experiences of peers or groups when appropriate to reduce perceived risk. Build rapport genuinely. People are more open to change when they like and trust the speaker. And be honest about limited opportunities when urgency matters, framed as a helpful reality rather than a sales tactic. Ethical influence is about creating shared wins rather than temporary advantage. Finally, make these habits daily practice. Think before you speak. Pause and breathe. Read and listen to good communicators with the intent to decode what they do, not to mimic them. Ask more questions than you answer. Reflect after conversations on what landed and what didn't. Practice short, purposeful remarks in low-pressure contexts so that when high-stakes moments arrive, your muscles and breath already know the path to clarity. Speak from values consistently so your voice becomes recognizable and trustworthy. Over time, these small practices compound into a communication style that is easier to rely on than to improvise. Your voice is a tool of influence that requires attention like any other craft. The world does not need more noise, it needs messages delivered with purpose, empathy, and honesty. Begin with small, consistent actions, tighten your language, organize your thoughts, listen well, and speak with authenticity. One clear sentence delivered with conviction can shift a meeting. One well-timed story can change someone's mind. One deliberate pause can make your point unforgettable. You don't need permission to begin. You only need the willingness to start and the discipline to practice. You've already learned the building blocks: clarity, rhythm, structure, tone, listening, storytelling, and presence. Now let's turn those pieces into a daily system that rewires how you speak, how you show up, and how others respond. Small habits practiced consistently create enormous change. If you want your voice to become reliable and magnetic, design a routine that reinforces the exact behaviors you want to embody in moments that matter. Begin each day with a brief vocal warm-up and mental check-in. Spend 2 minutes breathing deeply and speaking 5 slow, clear sentences aloud. Choose statements you might actually use: a short introduction of yourself, a concise explanation of what you do, and a calm, confident way to offer an opinion. These tiny rehearsals train the muscles in your throat and the timing of your breath. They also prime your mind to favor clarity over hurry during the day. Think of it as physical practice for speech: the body learns through repetition, and the voice follows. Next, cultivate a listening ritual. In at least one conversation each day, practice full presence. Put your phone away, maintain eye contact, and ask one open question that invites vulnerability. When the other person replies, reflect back the essence of what they said before offering your perspective. This habit builds your ability to listen for meaning rather than waiting to respond, and it strengthens your sense of timing and empathy. The moment you pause to reflect, you gain two advantages: you gather richer information and you create space to craft a reply that lands. Keep a short list of go-to phrases that anchor you when nerves arrive. Phrases like "here's what I'm thinking," "one point I'd add is," and "the main idea is" are not scripts to hide behind but scaffolding that stops you from shrinking language with hedges and fillers. Practice speaking these starters aloud until they feel natural. When you find yourself reaching for a filler, replace it with one of these anchors or with intentional silence. The pause is not a gap in competence, it is a signal of calm thought. Cultivate a weekly micro-challenge. Choose one communication skill to stretch for 7 days, slowing your pace, eliminating a specific filler word, structuring every answer into 3 parts, or telling a short story in 2 minutes. Each day, track your progress in a simple note. After a week, reflect on the difference you felt and the reactions you noticed. Small, deliberate experiments like these accelerate improvement because they make practice measurable and focused. Record one voice memo per week where you speak for 90 seconds on a single idea. Play it back and listen like an outsider. What do you notice? Do you rush at the start? Do you trail off at the end? Do you rely on the same filler words? Mark one thing to change for the next week. This practice accelerates awareness, the most crucial ingredient for change, and it gives you a low-stakes environment to experiment with tone, pacing, and emphasis. When preparing for important conversations, reverse engineer the outcome. Rather than writing a script of everything you'll say, identify the one core result you want. Then choose 3 supporting points and a short example or story that illustrates each point. Rehearse the structure, not the exact phrasing. Structure becomes your safety net when the conversation veers. If challenged, return to your 3 points and restate the main result in a calm, concise sentence. This approach keeps your message coherent without making you sound memorized. Master the practice of the short story. Pick 3 true, concise stories from your life that reveal a professional lesson or a personal value. Each story should last no more than 60 seconds when told clearly. Practice trimming every detail that isn't essential. Leave only the setup, the obstacle, and the learning. Having a small repertoire of tight, relevant stories allows you to humanize logic quickly and to anchor abstract claims in something memorable. Practice speaking with an image in mind. Before you begin, imagine a single visual that summarizes your message: a lighthouse for guidance, a bridge for connection, a ladder for progress. When you evoke an image internally, your language becomes more concrete, your metaphors feel fresher, and listeners can picture your point. Concrete language increases retention and reduces the chance your message will dissolve into vague platitudes. Build a ritual for handling interruption and hostility. When someone interrupts or attacks, use a 3-step reset: breathe, name what you heard, then respond. For example, breathe once, say, "It sounds like you're concerned about the timeline," and then offer the most concise version of your perspective. This pattern prevents reactive escalation and gives you space to lead the exchange back to constructive ground. Practicing this reset in low-stakes moments makes it automatic when stakes rise. Invest time in your vocabulary, but do it intentionally. Rather than chasing obscure words, curate a personal set of useful, authentic terms that reflect how you think and what you do. Words like clarity, momentum, insight, outcome, and intentional are small anchors that signal competence without sounding performative. Use them in sentences that are natural to your voice. Avoid the trap of inserting vocabulary for the sake of impressing others. Your aim is communication, not decoration. Bring physical presence into everyday practice. Posture, eye contact, and small gestures change how your voice is perceived. Sit or stand with a straight back and an open chest. Let your hands rest where they can move naturally to emphasize a point. Keep your shoulders relaxed. These micro-adjustments use body language to support vocal authority. When you move in ways that feel grounded, your breathing normalizes and your tone settles into a more persuasive rhythm. Make feedback routine. Ask trusted colleagues or friends a focused question after a meeting or conversation: did my message land? What did you remember most? What felt unclear? Accept feedback with curiosity rather than defensiveness. Feedback is the mirror that shows where your intention and perception diverge. Over time, it will steer you towards subtle but potent shifts in delivery and content. Practice scenarios where the outcome matters to you and then deliberately add a constraint. You'll speak for only 60 seconds, you'll answer only 2 questions, you'll avoid using the word like. Constraints force economy and precision. The more you practice constraint-driven speaking, the easier it becomes to deliver crisp, memorable statements in real situations. Teach others what you're learning. Explaining an idea strengthens your grasp of it and reveals blind spots. Lead a short conversation at work or with friends where your goal is to help someone else speak clearer. Coaching others helps you internalize principles because you translate abstract strategies into practical steps for another person. Connect your speech to values. Before major conversations, ask yourself which core value this exchange should reflect: integrity, curiosity, courage, or care. Let that value shape your opening line and anchor the tone of the conversation. When your voice reflects an intention beyond persuasion, people are more willing to receive and collaborate. Values-driven speech creates durable trust that survives disagreement. Use timing deliberately. There is a rhythm to when to speak and when to listen. If someone is emotionally charged, delay persuasion and instead focus on validation. If someone is uncertain, provide evidence and a short example. If someone is already motivated, invite action and offer support. Reading the moment and matching your communication to the listener's readiness is often more persuasive than saying everything at once. Make silence a visible skill. Sometimes the most powerful line you'll ever speak is the one you never say. Use silence to let ideas sink in, to invite others to speak, or to let tension cool. Resist the urge to fill emptiness with noise. The practiced pause conveys clarity, thoughtfulness, and confidence. It tells listeners you are comfortable with your words and that you trust them to process what you've just said. Practice recovery. Everyone stumbles, forgets a line, or loses momentum. Prepare short recovery phrases: "Let me reframe that," or "Give me a second to clarify." These phrases allow you to regain control without producing awkward fillers. Recovery is not a failure, it's an essential part of polished speaking because it shows composure and intentionality. Build a closing habit: end with a clear takeaway or next step. Instead of trailing off, summarize your main point in one sentence and state an action or question that moves the conversation forward. A crisp close turns ideas into outcomes and leaves listeners with a clear sense of direction. Finally, commit to a long-term mindset. Speaking well is a craft, not a destination. There will be periods of rapid improvement and times when progress feels slow. The difference between occasional eloquence and consistent influence is daily practice, reflection, and generosity. Speak with curiosity more than judgment. Measure progress by how often you try, not by how perfectly you perform. As you implement these habits, remember to make language your ally, not an ornament. Authenticity amplifies technique. The goal is not perfect polish but clear, honest connection. When clarity aligns with heart and preparation supports presence, your voice stops being just words and becomes a reliable instrument for shaping outcomes, building relationships, and opening opportunities. A practical example to bring this together: imagine you're entering a performance review. Start with one sentence that names the outcome you want. Pause. Offer 3 concise points that illustrate your contribution, each backed by a short example. Pause and invite feedback. Listen and reflect back the key concerns. Close by proposing one clear next step. This pattern keeps the conversation purposeful, shows you're prepared, and makes it simple for the other person to respond constructively. In time, these rituals become effortless. You will find yourself pausing less out of fear and more out of design. Your sentences will tighten because you have practiced economy of language. Your stories will land because you have rehearsed their arc. Your presence will grow because your body, breath, and voice are aligned with the message you care about. That alignment is the essence of speaking smart. One final nudge: commit to sharing what you learn with someone else. Teach a friend, mentor a colleague, or record a short video where you explain one of these practices. Teaching consolidates skill and honors the cycle of growth. If you want a small community that supports consistent improvement and offers accountability, consider following creators and resources that focus on practical communication skills and real-world practice. Replace empty polish with persistent practice. Over time, the compound effect of daily habits will deliver more influence than any single presentation ever could. You've learned the foundational habits: clarity of language, thoughtful pacing, structured thought, and the value of story. Now we move into how persuasion actually works in conversation, and how you can influence outcomes without forcing them. Influence isn't coercion. It's guiding people to see value, to choose willingly, and to move toward decisions that serve both sides. When you understand the mechanics of influence, you stop treating persuasion as a tool of manipulation and start treating it as a bridge to agreement and action. At the heart of persuasive conversation are predictable human tendencies. People respond to kindness, consistency, peer behavior, affinity, and scarcity. These tendencies are not weaknesses to exploit, they are cues you can use ethically to make your communication more effective. If you give value before asking, people are far more receptive. If you invite someone to state a commitment out loud, they often align their actions with that stated intention. If you show that others in similar situations have succeeded with a particular choice, you reduce perceived risk and increase comfort. If you genuinely connect with someone and show respect for their perspective, they are more likely to listen. If you honestly clarify what's limited or time-sensitive, you help people prioritize in ways they otherwise might avoid. These are simple dynamics, but when used with integrity they transform a conversation from debate into collaboration. To apply them, begin conversations by offering something useful, even if it's small. Share an observation, a quick resource, or a concise insight that genuinely helps the other person. That initial gesture shifts the exchange away from transactional asking and toward mutual exchange. People notice who gives first, and that initial generosity builds reciprocal openness without strings attached. If you do this regularly, your reputation becomes one of contribution and trust, and influence follows naturally because people want to give back to those who have already given to them. Another practical approach is to create micro-commitments. Ask a simple question that invites agreement on a minor point first. Once someone says yes to a small, non-threatening idea, they are more likely to stay consistent with that position when you invite larger commitments. This works because humans have an internal drive to be coherent with their statements. When you guide someone to verbalize a value or tiny preference, you make it easier for them to take the next step that aligns with that statement. Social proof is powerful. People look to peers when they're unsure. If you can show relevant examples of others who have made a similar choice and benefited, you reduce hesitation. This isn't about boasting, it's about contextualizing decisions so they feel grounded rather than risky. Use examples that match the listener's world. Generic claims have little persuasive force, specific, relatable examples resonate. Liking matters. People are influenced more by those they genuinely like or feel similar to. The fastest route to being liked is simple authenticity and curiosity. Ask questions that show you care about their goals, empathize with their challenges, and reflect back what you hear. When people feel seen and understood, their defenses drop and they become open to new ideas. Building rapport is not a trick, it's a human practice that makes complex decisions comfortable to discuss. Scarcity drives action because we weigh potential loss more heavily than potential gain. When something is genuinely limited, time, availability, capacity, framing that constraint helps people act in alignment with their priorities rather than defaulting to avoidance. Present scarcity as information rather than pressure. Help them see the consequences of delay in a respectful, factual way so they can decide with clarity, not fear. Ethical influence binds these techniques to honesty. Always root your persuasive moves in clear benefits, in respect for the listener's autonomy, and in transparency about trade-offs. The long-term power of persuasion is a reputation for integrity. If people feel you respect their intelligence, they will return to you as a trusted advisor, which is far more valuable than one-off wins. There is a rhythm to persuasive moments. Start by listening, name the person's core concern in a sentence that shows you understood, present a concise proposition that aligns with that concern, and close with an option for the next step that requires minimal friction. This four-part rhythm, listen, reflect, propose, simplify next steps, keeps the exchange manageable and increases the chance of constructive movement. When people feel heard first, they are much less defensive and much more curious about what follows. Story is where persuasion becomes memorable. Facts inform, but stories move. A short narrative that illustrates a consequence or result gives texture to the numbers. When you tell a story about a client who avoided a costly mistake because they acted, or a team that accelerated results after a small change, you translate abstract benefits into lived outcomes. Choose stories that are brief, vivid, and directly tied to the decision at hand. The purpose is not entertainment, it is to create a mental picture that makes the logical benefits feel real. In negotiation, adopt a posture of problem-solving rather than winning. Frame the exchange as mutual problem-solving, name the shared goal, surface constraints, propose options that address both sides, and ask for feedback. When you co-design a solution with someone, they feel ownership of the result and are more likely to commit. Use questions that reveal priorities and trade-offs. Questions such as what outcome matters most and what would make this acceptable invite collaborative thinking rather than opposition. Timing is another essential element. Persuasion is most effective when the listener is emotionally ready to consider a change. If they are reactive, soothe first. If they are analytical, provide succinct evidence and clear examples. If they are motivated, amplify the call to action. Reading the emotional and cognitive temperature of the conversation allows you to match your approach to their receptivity. This is the practice of adaptive speaking. You don't deliver the same pitch to every person, you align your message with the moment. Confidence and humility work together in persuasion. Speak clearly and decisively about what you believe, and simultaneously acknowledge uncertainty where it exists. A line of honest qualification, "This is what I've seen, and here's where I might be wrong," adds credibility rather than undermining it, because it shows you are thoughtful and not blindly certain. People trust those who can hold a position strongly while remaining open to new information. A key conversational skill is the strategic question. Good questions can be more persuasive than good speeches because they invite the listener to discover their own reasons for change. Ask questions that lead someone to identify the problem themselves or to outline how a proposed solution could help. When a person connects the dots themselves, the shift is internalized and more durable than if you had simply asserted it for them. Practice influence in low-stakes conversations to build comfort and nuance. Test small offers, observe how people respond, and refine your approach. Note which stories feel authentic and which examples resonate. Keep a mental or written list of persuasive phrases that feel natural to you. Over time you will develop a repertoire of conversational moves that fit your style and values. Finally, integrate influence into a broader communication identity. Speak from a posture of contribution, not demand. Let your voice reflect a consistent commitment to honesty, clarity, and respect. Influence is most sustainable when it is part of a pattern of trustworthy behavior. People decide to follow voices they believe will continue to act in good faith and deliver value. When influence is practiced as an expression of service, it becomes a powerful way to shape outcomes that matter. A conversation guided by listening, anchored in honesty, framed with relevant examples, and closed with a clear next step is more likely to produce durable action than any prolonged persuasion tactic. Use influence to make collaborative decisions easier, to reduce friction, and to align people on shared goals. You've explored clarity, structure, tone, story, presence, and persuasion. Now we turn to the subtler daily practices that embed these skills into your instinctive behavior, habits that make smart speaking automatic when pressure rises or when the moment simply needs your voice. The way you maintain and grow your communication ability matters as much as the techniques themselves. Think of these practices as a training program for your voice, attention, and emotional intelligence, designed to keep you grounded, persuasive, and human in every conversation. Begin by treating speaking like a craft that requires maintenance. Professionals warm up their instruments, you should warm up your voice and mind. Simple rituals: 2 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing, a few slow phrases spoken aloud, and a short mental checklist of your goal, shift your nervous system from reactive to deliberate. Warm-ups are not vanity, they are functional. They steady your breath, lower your heart rate, and prepare your vocal folds to produce cleaner, more resonant sound. When you enter a meeting or press record, those few moments of preparation create a measurable difference in how your voice is perceived. Next, build a practice of daily listening audits. At the end of each day, pick one conversation where you felt present and one where you drifted. For each, recall the patterns. When did you interrupt? When did you lean in? When did you ask a question that deepened the exchange? This reflective habit strengthens your listening muscles because it converts experience into insight. Listening is not passive absorption, it is a skill that benefits from the same deliberate attention you give to speech mechanics. Designate micro-practice windows: 5 minutes in the morning, 5 in the afternoon. Use them to rehearse short, meaningful phrases you can deploy when nerves appear. Statements such as "here's what I think," "one quick idea," or "the main point is" are scaffolds, not scripts. Practicing them until they feel natural helps you avoid hedges and filler words when you need to be concise. The repetition trains neural pathways so that under stress your language stays sharp. Adopt a weekly experimentation mindset. Every week, pick a single communication variable to stretch: slow your average speaking rate by 10%, replace the filler word you use most, or sharpen your 1-minute story by removing one detail. Track the small improvements and notice the reactions you get from others. Weekly experiments create focused progress without overwhelming your schedule. They turn vague desire into measurable change. Use visual anchors to ground your message. Before important conversations, imagine one clear image that represents your central idea: a bridge, a compass, a table. Visual anchors translate into metaphors and concrete language that make abstract proposals tangible. When you speak from an image, your descriptions become more vivid and memorable, and people are more likely to recall your point hours later. Practice the art of strategic silence. Silence is not emptiness, it is an instrument. Use it to let complex statements land, to punctuate a claim, or to invite others into the space. When you pause after a key sentence, you let your listener's mind complete the thought and make it their own. Teach yourself to tolerate the brief discomfort of silence, it signals mastery, not uncertainty. A practiced pause turns ordinary sentences into memorable moments. Create a compact story library. Choose 6 brief true stories, 3 professional, 3 personal, that reveal a core lesson you often share: resilience, a change you led, a mistake that taught you something, a moment of clarity. Trim each story to 70 to 90 seconds and rehearse linking them to different types of points. Having a mental folder of short, relevant stories gives you instant material that can humanize a proposal, add credibility, or motivate a team. Develop a recovery protocol for conversational mishaps. When you stumble, miss a fact, lose a thread, or jump too hastily, use an elegant reset: pause, name the slip, and reframe. Phrases such as "let me reframe that" or "give me a second to be clearer" shift attention away from the mistake and back to your intent. Recovery phrases preserve credibility because they show composure and adaptability rather than flustered denial. Make feedback a regular ritual. After a presentation or an important meeting, ask 2 people one concise question: what is one thing that landed with clarity and one thing that could be clearer? Limit the focus so you can receive actionable feedback without getting overwhelmed. When you treat feedback as data, not judgment, you accelerate improvement because you know exactly what to change next. Practice empathy by mapping interests before offering solutions. In difficult conversations, list likely stakeholder needs in 1 sentence each. Then speak to those needs directly: here's how this helps X, here's how this reduces a risk for Y. This habit transforms proposals into tailored offers rather than generic suggestions. People respond to relevance. When you pre-map concerns, your words find targets more easily. Use constraint-driven speaking to sharpen your points. Give yourself limits: speak for 60 seconds, answer only with 3 bullets, or refuse to use a favorite filler. Constraints force precision, compelling you to select the clearest evidence and the most persuasive phrasing. When you train with constraints, your default delivery becomes cleaner and your messages become easier to follow. Cultivate curiosity as an everyday stance. Before entering any conversation, note one genuine question you want to ask that is not about you. Ask about the other person's goals, pressures, or hopes. Curiosity shifts the energy of an exchange from performance to discovery, which disarms defensiveness and opens deeper dialogue. It's an ingredient that keeps conversation collaborative rather than combative. Anchor your practice in values. Ask yourself what the most important value is for the conversation: integrity, clarity, compassion, efficiency, and let that value shape your opening line. Framing your intent through a value signals to listeners what you prioritize and makes it easier for them to see the logic behind your delivery. When your words align with a clear value, they gain an ethical weight that digits and data alone cannot achieve. Prioritize rest and vocal health. Your voice is a physical instrument. Hydration, sleep, and recovery matter. Avoid straining your voice. When fatigue rises, use shorter sentences and deeper breaths. Small physical habits, posture, regular hydration, and mindful breathing, sustain your vocal stamina and sharpen clarity. If you notice persistent hoarseness, treat it as a signal to rest rather than push through. Build a habit of concise closures. Always end interactions with a clear takeaway or next step. Instead of trailing off, finish with one crisp sentence that states the decision, the deadline, or the next conversation. Clear closures convert intentions into outcomes and reduce ambiguity that often causes follow-up friction. Practice gratitude and humility in delivery. A small recognition, "Thank you for this insight, I appreciate your candor," lowers resistance and invites collaboration. Humility paired with competence creates trust. People prefer leaders who can both stand behind a recommendation and admit complexity when it exists. Teach what you're learning. Explaining a technique to a peer or coaching a colleague reinforces your own skill because it forces you to distill principles into actionable steps. When you teach, you uncover gaps and clarify the language you'll use under pressure. Finally, commit to long-term compassion for your progress. Speaking well is incremental. Track your growth with snapshots, record your voice once a month, note reactions, and celebrate small wins. The path to mastery is paved with consistent effort, reflection, and kindness toward the self in moments you forget a point or lose your thread. Those moments are part of the work, not proof that you cannot improve. When these practices are woven into your daily life, speaking smart becomes habitual rather than exceptional. Your voice becomes a reliable tool for influence, connection, and leadership. Each deliberate habit, breath control, story selection, strategic silence, value-based openings, recovery language, compounds into a presence that audiences trust. Storytelling is the secret instrument that turns abstract ideas into lived experience. When facts alone fail to move people, a well-told story will open their hearts and direct their minds. A story gives context to logic, a human face to numbers, and rhythm to a message that otherwise might float away. The difference between a list of benefits and a brief narrative is the difference between being informative and being memorable. Stories create memory anchors. They let listeners relive a moment so the lesson attaches to emotion as well as reason. A compact, powerful story has a simple architecture: set the scene, reveal a struggle, show the turning point, and deliver a clear lesson. The scene establishes who is involved and what the moment looked like. The struggle creates tension and stakes. The turning point is the decision or action that changed the outcome. The lesson is explicit: tie the narrative back to the idea you want your listener to keep. If you leave the lesson implicit, people might enjoy the tale but miss the point. Tie the end of the story to the practical takeaway and you transform entertainment into influence. Choose stories that are true, relevant, and concise. Authenticity matters because listeners detect performance. A story that rings true will resonate in ways a manufactured anecdote cannot. Relevance means the narrative maps directly onto the issue your audience faces. It should illuminate a decision, reduce a fear, or reveal a simple path forward. Concision forces you to cut details that distract. Trim every line that does not accelerate the listener toward the lesson. A 60 to 90-second story, clean and specific, can carry more persuasive weight than 10 minutes of argument. Language inside a story should be concrete. Use sensory words that let people see, hear, or feel the scene. Replace abstractions with images that anchor the listener's imagination. Instead of saying we improved morale, show the image of a team gathered around a whiteboard late at night sharing a small, hard-earned victory. That image makes abstract outcomes feel real and attainable. Stories are especially effective when paired with contrast. Show what life looked like before a change and then after. The before/after frame highlights the consequence of action or inaction and makes the benefit palpable. Contrast sharpens the listener's sense of direction. It helps them feel the cost of not acting as vividly as the gain of choosing a new path. Another story technique is to make the hero relatable. When you position yourself as flawless, audiences close off. When you expose a mistake, a struggle, or an awkward moment, you invite empathy. The paradox is that vulnerability builds credibility. Audiences trust people who admit limitations because those admissions signal honesty and self-awareness. When you pair vulnerability with agency, showing what you learned and how you adjusted, you turn weakness into a source of strength. Timing matters. Place a story where it will do the most work, early to build connection, in the middle to illustrate a point, or at the end to make a closing emotionally sticky. A story at the end functions like a final chord. It gives listeners an image to carry away and a feeling that will nudge memory. Stories are not filler, they are the structural glue that holds logic and emotion together. Charisma grows from the way you make people feel and the clarity with which you steer their attention. Presence is core. Being fully attentive to the person you are addressing creates the perception that they are important. Warmth communicates that you care about who they are and what they bring. Power is the steady certainty that your words matter. None of these require flair or theatrics, they require consistency and intention in small behaviors, steady eye contact, a calm breath before speaking, naming someone's contribution aloud, and pausing before a key sentence so that the listener's mind can align with your point. Words that convey charisma are simple and direct. Avoid ornate phrasing when a straightforward sentence will do. Use personal pronouns to create closeness. Address listeners' concerns by name or by specific role so they feel seen. Charisma also grows when your voice shapes space, slow when you want a point to sink in, brisk when you want to signal movement, softer when you want to invite intimacy. These choices are not performance, they are consideration for the listener's processing rhythm. Influence in everyday conversation is practical and ethical. Use reciprocity by offering value before asking for something in return. Be consistent with your language so people experience you as reliable. Use social proof through specific, relatable examples that show others have adopted an idea successfully. Build liking by being genuinely curious about the other person's perspective. And when urgency is real, frame scarcity as an informative constraint rather than a pressure tactic. Influence that erodes trust is short-lived. Influence that respects autonomy and shows clear benefit creates durable alignment. The skill of asking guiding questions cannot be overstated. The best persuasive moves often come from well-crafted questions that let people talk themselves into conclusions. Questions like what outcome matters most and what small step would make a meaningful difference lead others to articulate priorities and feel ownership over any decision. Open-ended questions invite exploration. Targeted questions narrow the focus to action. Combined, they guide a conversation from curiosity to commitment. Negotiation should be reframed as joint problem solving. When you approach a disagreement with the mindset of designing a shared solution, you invite cooperation rather than competition. Name shared goals clearly. Surface constraints openly. Offer options that address multiple concerns. Ask which option would be easiest to implement and why. When people help craft the solution, they are more likely to enact it. The most persuasive negotiators are those who can convert adversarial dynamics into collaborative design. Prepare for difficult conversations by clarifying the desired outcome and 3 supporting points that address major concerns. Visualize how the exchange might go and rehearse your breathing and opening line. In the moment, lead with what you want to create, not what you want to dispute. That shifts the tone from corrective to generative. When emotions spike, return to listening and name what you heard before presenting your counterpoint. That simple reset communicates respect and reduces defensiveness. Emotional intelligence is the compass that steadies persuasive speaking. Recognize your own emotional triggers and plan strategies to manage them, a single deep breath, a grounding sentence, or a pause to gather thoughts. When you regulate your emotional state, you create a container large enough for others to reveal theirs. Empathy does not surrender your stance, it enlarges the possibility that your stance will be heard. Practical rehearsal converts theory into habit. Practice telling one story a day in conversations where it fits naturally. Record a 1-minute pitch and refine it until it flows like a natural sentence rather than a rehearsed script. Practice a 10-second pause before the key line in your message and notice how it changes listener responses. The nervous system learns through repetition. What feels deliberate early becomes automatic with enough repetitions. Curate your language carefully. Replace hedges and qualifiers with concise anchors. Here's the idea, the core point is, and one clear takeaway. These phrases do not command authority arrogantly, they give structure for the listener and reduce ambiguity. When you habitually frame thoughts with these anchors, your audience spends less energy decoding and more energy engaging. Learn to close conversations with clarity. Endings convert thought into action. Summarize the key point in one sentence and state the next step in clear terms: who will do what by when. A crisp close reduces the most common failure mode in communication, good intentions that never turn into outcomes. If you cannot commit to a specific next step, close by agreeing on when you will return with a proposal or answer. Closure is a kindness that helps everyone move forward. Sustain your voice through a lifetime of practice and care. Vocal health is not glamorous but essential. Hydrate, rest your voice when it feels strained, and use diaphragmatic breathing to support projection and calm. Physical stamina supports emotional steadiness, the two are intertwined. Protect your instrument by pausing when tired and choosing shorter, clearer communications rather than pushing through with diminished clarity. Finally, embed speaking into a life of curiosity and generosity. Read widely, not to collect quotes but to widen perspective. Listen intentionally to people outside your usual circles to expand the range of images and metaphors you can draw from. Teach what you learn. Explaining a concept to others crystallizes it in your own mind and exposes areas that need refinement. When your speaking grows from curiosity and a habit of giving, influence will follow as a natural byproduct of service. Every conversation is an opportunity to practice these elements. Aim for steady improvement rather than sudden perfection. The compound returns of small habits, short deliberate stories, mindful pauses, clear closes, and daily listening, will transform how often your voice is heard and how deeply your message lands. Keep the work humble, consistent, and aligned with the values you want your voice to reflect. You've come a long way through practical techniques and daily rituals that sharpen your voice, organize your thinking, and deepen your emotional connection. Now we'll pull everything together into a single practical roadmap for how to use your voice as a tool for long-term influence, leadership, and human connection. This is about turning isolated skills into a coherent identity you can rely on when it matters most: interviews, reviews, difficult conversations, presentations, and the small daily moments where reputation is built. The goal is simple: make your speech predictable in quality and powerful in effect, so under pressure your instincts take you to clarity, not chaos. Begin by defining the 3 outcomes you want your voice to accomplish in most interactions: to be understood, to be trusted, and to move someone toward a useful next step. If you can measure those outcomes, even informally, you'll know when your practice is working. Being understood means your idea lands without repeated clarification. Being trusted means others respond without hedging or defensiveness. Moving toward a next step means conversations conclude with a direction, a commitment, or a clear follow-up. These outcomes are practical accountability. They transform the abstract desire to be better into tangible markers you can track and improve. Adopt a short pre-conversation checklist that you run mentally before speaking, one sentence that states the single outcome you want, two reasons that support that outcome, and one concrete next step you want to leave on the table. This checklist is quick, portable, and surprisingly stabilizing. When you enter a meeting, a coffee, or a call with that mini plan in mind, your language tends to narrow toward precision and away from rambling. Practice forming this checklist on small interactions so it becomes automatic for big ones. Use a consistent structure when you speak in moments that matter. Setup, core idea, and close is simple yet effective. The setup frames context and aligns attention. The core idea delivers the signal, the thing you want remembered. The close converts the idea into action or invites a defined next step. This three-part architecture is versatile. It works for a one-line answer in a meeting, a 2-minute pitch, or a 10-minute presentation. By defaulting to structure you make your thinking legible to others, and legible thinking wins more often than brilliant but disorganized thinking. Make story your default connective tissue. Have 3 short stories ready, one professional, one relational, one personal, that illustrate your key values and that you can tell in 60 to 90 seconds. These stories should be true, concise, and anchored to clear lessons. When you need engagement or persuasion, a brief narrative brings the point alive and gives listeners a place to anchor the logic. Stories allow people to feel the consequence of choice instead of merely digesting abstract claims. Practice strategic pauses until they become second nature. A pause before you answer communicates thoughtfulness, a pause after a claim allows the listener to absorb it. If nerves push you to fill silence, rehearse 1-second pauses and extend them gradually to 2 or 3 seconds. Those beats are the difference between a sentence that feels hurried and one that lands with authority. Silence is not absence, it's emphasis by omission. Use it to punctuate, to invite, and to amplify. The most memorable lines often sit in listeners' minds precisely because a pause allowed them to settle there. Cultivate a minimal, high-utility vocabulary that fits your values and role. Avoid chasing rare synonyms or trying to sound more important with long words. Instead, choose a handful of clear, repeatable terms that reflect the outcomes you want to produce, words like clarity, outcome, trade-off, alignment, momentum, and insight. Using the same concise language across contexts builds cognitive familiarity for your audience and helps your messages stick. When people hear the same clear terms used consistently, they start to anticipate and remember your ideas. Train your recovery phrases. No one speaks flawlessly all the time. Prepare a few graceful recoveries that let you reframe if you lose your thread. Let me reframe that more clearly, here's the core point again, and give me a second to be precise. These short lines buy you composure and redirect attention to your intent rather than the mistake. Recovery is not a confession of weakness, it is evidence of control. Make listening an active habit that you practice deliberately. Adopt a small ritual. When someone finishes, wait 1 full breath before you respond, then paraphrase their central point in 2 sentences. That moment recalibrates the exchange from reaction to response and signals respect. Listening reveals what matters beneath words, fears, constraints, and priorities. When you reflect that back, you build immediate credibility because your replies are grounded in the other person's reality rather than in your assumptions. Experiment with constraint-driven speaking exercises regularly. Speak for 60 seconds only, or answer questions using exactly 3 points. Constraints force you to prioritize and refine your evidence. When you train within limits, your natural tendency toward verbosity is reconditioned into precision. Over time, you will find that being concise becomes your default even when you are not consciously enforcing a limit. Carve out weekly feedback loops. After key conversations, ask one trusted peer, what was the clearest thing I said, and what should I say differently next time? Keep the question narrow so feedback is actionable. If you record yourself, review 1 minute at a time and mark the single habit to change for the next week. Small, iterative adjustments compound into meaningful progress. Prioritize vocal and physical hygiene. Hydrate, sleep, and protect your voice from strain. Practice diaphragmatic breathing to support longer sentences and to reduce the tendency to rush. Grounded posture supports strong breath and calm tone. When your body appears composed, your voice follows. Remember that vocal stamina is a physical resource. Manage it deliberately rather than assuming you can push through fatigue without cost. Build a system for preparing stories and examples that are tailored to your audiences. Maintain a short file, mental or written, of client wins, customer frustrations, team achievements, and personal lessons. When you're preparing a pitch or a meeting, pull 3 examples from that file that map directly to the listener's context. Specificity beats generic claims every time. When your examples feel like scenarios the listener could imagine themselves in, your proposals feel less risky and more relevant. Rehearse under pressure. Simulate interruptions, hostile questions, and time constraints in practice sessions. Role-play with colleagues and ask them to press on your weak points. Practice stepping back, breathing, and using structure to return the conversation to the 3 elements you planned: setup, core idea, close. By conditioning your response under stress you reduce the gap between practice and performance. Anchor your speaking identity in a small set of values. Choose 3 values that will guide how you speak. Examples might be clarity, curiosity, and care. Before important conversations, remind yourself of the value that matters most in this interaction. Let that value shape your opening line and your tone. When your voice is consistent with a value, people don't just remember facts, they build trust in the person who speaks. Use questions as tools for co-creation. Instead of declaring a solution, ask a question that surfaces a shared priority. What outcome would make this successful for you, or which constraint matters most right now? Questions invite ownership and often produce commitments that feel internally generated. When people articulate the rationale themselves, their move toward action is more durable. Practice closing with clarity. End with one sentence that summarizes the main point and one specific next step: who will do what by when. Many conversations fail not for lack of insight but for failure to convert intent into action. A crisp close reduces follow-up friction and makes it easier for others to align. Build your reputation by small, consistent acts of giving. Share useful insights, recommend short readings, or volunteer a practical suggestion. Over time, consistent contribution creates the social currency that makes persuasion easier and more ethical. When you give without immediate return, people notice, and influence becomes the natural byproduct of a trusted pattern. Keep your improvement sustainable by tracking progress with a simple monthly ritual. Record a 1-minute summary of what you've improved and what you plan to adjust next. Listen back 6 months later and you'll have tangible proof of change. Progress is visible when you archive and revisit it. When you face high stakes, reduce complexity by focusing on the single most important truth you want the other person to hold. Make that truth simple enough to state in one short sentence. Then support it with 2 concise points and a short example. People will rarely remember everything you say, but they will remember a central truth repeated and reinforced with clear examples. Finally, adopt a mindset of humane persistence. Speaking well is a practice sustained over a lifetime. You will have off days. You will forget a detail, stumble over a sentence, or lose confidence. Treat those moments as data, not verdicts. Return to the rituals: breath, pause, structure, story, and keep working. Influence is the slow accumulation of consistent behavior. Charisma is the residue of repeated integrity in speech and action. Remember to align language to platform. If you're recording audio for a video, imagine a listener who can rewind and replay, favor clear, concrete phrases and visual language. If you're in a live meeting, allow extra pauses and more questions to keep people engaged. If you're negotiating, front-load risks and trade-offs so trust is built through transparency. Each context favors different tactical emphasis, but the foundation, clarity, structure, empathy, and authenticity, remains constant. As you bring this roadmap into daily life, let the small rituals anchor your transformation: a 2-minute vocal warm-up before key calls, a 60-second story at hand, one reflective question after each meeting, a weekly constraint challenge, and monthly progress reviews. These anchors make skill development practical and avoid the trap of sporadic effort that yields uneven results. If you're creating content or training others, package these practices into repeatable, bite-sized lessons. Short, actionable pieces are more likely to be practiced than long, theoretical lectures. When teaching, prioritize exercises that can be repeated in everyday contexts: introductions, status updates, feedback moments, so improvement happens where it matters most. Above all, commit to communicating as an act of service. When your speech aims to clarify, to create alignment, and to help others make better decisions, influence becomes an ethical practice rather than a tactic. People will notice the difference between someone who speaks to win and someone who speaks to help. Choose the latter, and your voice will build durable relationships, stronger teams, and better outcomes. You've reached the final section of this series, the place where all the techniques, habits, and small rituals meet to become the way you move through the world with your voice. This is not a neat end but a practical handoff, from learning to living, from practice to habit, from intention to identity. Your goal now is to take the clarity you've built and make it dependable. Dependable means that when pressure rises, your instincts don't scatter, they return to the 3 elements you can always trust: a clear outcome, a simple structure, and a calm presence. Begin with the daily minimum: 2 minutes of breath and 1 minute of concise speaking. Breathe deeply to settle the nervous system, then speak one clear sentence aloud that reflects what you want to be known for today. Keep the sentence short, specific, and anchored to a value: clarity, curiosity, care, or courage. The physical act of saying one chosen sentence every morning trains your body and mind to favor deliberate phrasing instead of hurried reaction. This is a tiny habit with outsized returns because it primes attention and aligns intention. When you enter any conversation, have a portable checklist in your head: 1 sentence outcome, 2 supporting points, and 1 actionable next step. This checklist is not a script, it's a stabilizer. It keeps your language focused and it gives you a retrieval cue under stress. If you find your words scattering, return to that checklist, state the outcome in 1 short line, then deliver your next 2 points slowly and finish with a clear close. Practice this in low-stakes moments and the pattern becomes your default when stakes are high. Make structure your muscle memory. No matter the length of the interaction, default to setup, core idea, and close. The setup frames context and aligns attention, the core idea is the signal you want to remain in the listener's memory, the close converts talk into action. This 3-part architecture works for a 2-sentence reply in a meeting or a 10-minute presentation. When you default to structure, you make your thinking legible, which in turn increases trust and reduces miscommunication. Turn stories into your credibility shortcuts. A short, true story can do more work than 10 slides of data. Keep a compact library of 6 stories, 3 professional, 3 personal, that illustrate your values and lessons learned. Each story should be 60 to 90 seconds and end with a clear takeaway. Practice linking those stories to different types of points so they come naturally when you need them. Stories are not embellishments, they are the neural glue that makes ideas memorable. Use constraint as a sharpening tool. Regularly practice speaking within tight limits: speak for 60 seconds, answer using 3 points, or present an idea using a single image. Constraints force economy and force you to choose the clearest evidence. The habit of constraint reduces the tendency to over-explain and makes your speech more compelling. When time is short, constraint becomes your ally. Cultivate recovery phrases and deploy them without shame. Everyone misses a beat. Prepare 3 simple recoveries such as "let me reframe that," "let me be clearer," or "one more concise way to put it is." These phrases allow you to restart gracefully and keep authority. Using a recovery line shows composure, it signals that you are in control of your message, not at its mercy. Make listening a visible skill by reflecting back the essence of what someone just said before you answer. Take a breath, paraphrase the key point in 2 sentences, then respond. This rhythm of listen, reflect, answer turns conversations into collaboration and dramatically raises your credibility. When people feel heard, they become open rather than defensive. Listening is both a relational practice and a persuasive strategy. Keep a compact vocabulary of reliable, repeatable terms that suit your goals. Avoid chasing novelty for the sake of sounding impressive. Choose simple words like clarity, impact, alignment, insight, momentum, and outcome. Repeat them consistently across contexts so your audience forms mental associations with your messages. Familiar, precise language builds cognitive ease and helps ideas stick. Practice physical presence as a routine. Posture, breath, and eye contact are not theatrical frills, they are functional variables that change the acoustic and emotional quality of your voice. Before a call or presentation, reset your posture, take 2 deep diaphragmatic breaths, and soften your facial muscles. These small acts stabilize tone and pacing and reduce the likelihood of filler words. Vocal health matters: hydrate, rest when needed, and treat your voice like an instrument you maintain. Frame persuasion as ethical service. Use reciprocity by offering value before asking anything. Use micro-commitments to build momentum, ask for small agreements, then scale them. Use social proof with specific, relatable examples. Use scarcity honestly to highlight timing or limited capacity without pressure. And always anchor your persuasive moves in empathy. Influence that prioritizes shared wins sustains relationships and reputation. Use questions intentionally. The best way to change a mind is often to let that mind change itself. Ask questions that lead people to articulate their own priorities and constraints. Questions like what outcome matters most for you? And what would make this solution workable for your team? Invite ownership and often produce commitments that are stronger than any argument you could offer. Build feedback loops into your practice. After important conversations, ask one trusted person, what landed? What could be clearer? Keep the questions narrow so feedback is actionable. Record short voice memos and listen back quarterly to measure progress. Small, consistent feedback compounds faster than occasional marathon effort. Close every conversation with a clear next step. Ambiguity destroys momentum. Finish with one crisp sentence that states who will do what by when. If a decision is not possible, agree on when you will return with a proposal or answer. Closure is a kindness that converts good intent into real outcomes. Adopt a mindset of long-term curiosity. Read broadly, not to collect technical facts but to widen the range of metaphors and images you can use to make ideas concrete. Listen to communicators you admire to decode their habits rather than mimic their voice. Teach what you learn, explaining a skill strengthens it. Growth in communication is incremental and cumulative. Small daily practices beat sporadic heroics. When stakes rise, reduce complexity. Pick one truth you want the listener to hold and repeat it in different ways: a simple statement, a supporting fact, and a short example. People rarely remember every detail, they remember the central truth and the emotion that accompanied it. Make that truth easy to state and harder to forget. Embed values in your voice. Let clarity, respect, and curiosity guide how you open conversations and how you close them. When your words consistently reflect a set of values, people trust the speaker even when they disagree. Values-driven speech creates durable authority because it signals that your intent is stable and ethical. Be gentle with yourself. Progress will be uneven. You will have days when your voice doesn't cooperate and times when anxiety returns. Treat those moments as data rather than verdicts. Return to basic rituals: breathe, pause, structure, and speak from a simple outcome. Over time, consistency builds competence and competence breeds confidence. If you create content or train others, package lessons into repeatable, bite-sized exercises that can be practiced in real interactions. Micro-practice beats long theory: a daily 1-minute story, a weekly constraint challenge, and monthly reflection notes will yield visible changes without requiring heroic effort. Finally, commit to communicating as an act of service. When your primary aim is to help others make better decisions, to reduce friction, and to create understanding, your influence becomes ethical and durable. People will notice the difference between someone who speaks to win and someone who speaks to help. Choose the latter, and your voice will build relationships, solve problems, and open doors in ways that mere technique cannot. Your voice is neither fixed nor fragile, it is a skill that grows with attention, honesty, and practice. Start with the smallest habit you can sustain and build from there. Speak with purpose, close with clarity, listen with presence, and let your words reflect your values. Over time, the compound effect of these small commitments will transform not only how often people hear you but how deeply they respond.